I hope this music isn't scaring you. Today I'm going to show you how to put the game settings onto our pause menu. So here they are. I'll do the audio level first. So get that out of there so you can mute the sound. That's the full game sound right there. Right, so this fantastic is your quality settings, which comes from Edit, Project Settings, Quality, and you can see them over here. Fastest, all these names are the same as you see over here. Fastest, you can see them change. And if you wanted to, you could change the names here, and it would show up in this window as those names. So that's pretty neato. The light intensity is how bright your directional lighting is. So if we click on a directional light, you'll see this intensity bar will go up and down. Now this is also on the window lighting object. That's that intensity there. Right, the ambient intensity comes from the lighting window, the scene. This is the ambient intensity there. You can see it change. I always do that. I always do the light intensity instead of ambient. Here it goes, up and down. All right, the reflection intensity is how much light bounces off the objects in the scene. And that's over here. The shadow type soft is in your quality settings here, shadow type. So that would be hard and no shadows. You can kind of see it right here happening. That's soft and hard. You can see the edge change a little. All right, the shadow strength is how dark are the shadows. You can go from all the way to nothing all the way to very dark. The shadow distance is how far away are the shadows drawn from your camera. So you could be very close or very far. Alright, we can turn the fog on in the scene, and the fog density is how thick is it. And you saw the audio level already. So, how did I do all of this stuff? Here, let me scare you with the... Yeah, that's pretty loud. Alright, so how did I do all of this? And we come over here and look into the code. This loaded level is just the currently loaded level, so we know not to change the settings if we're on the start window, because it wouldn't make much sense to change the lighting in the fog when you're looking at the title screen, although maybe some people would enjoy that. I personally wouldn't. So default quality level, the default light intensity, these are all the default settings for the things we were changing on the screen before, and these are the ones that actually do the changing. Alright. This load progress is for later in another video. Alright, so in here, in the awake, we apply the window settings, the camera stuff and all that other thing on the awake. So it would go down here to the apply settings. And if the loaded level is not equal to 0, 0 being the start level, we'll apply all the settings. Obviously it's doing the audio listener no matter what level we're on, so that is fine and dandy. Alright, so you set the quality level here. That's the thing that said fantastic or better or whatever all those other things were. And then we go into here to do the lights. So here we're just getting all the directional lights in the scene, and then we're gonna, if there are no lights in the scene, we just jump out because there's nothing to set. And for each light in the lights array, we go through and set the lights intensity, the shadow type, and the shadow strength. Then it goes back up here and sets the shadow distance, the render settings, ambient intensity, reflection intensity. And this had to be done because the reflection intensity is not being set at runtime unless this is done. It was just a kludge to make that work. Alright, and we turn the fog on or off depending on our setting here, and the fog density. if you want, it's all in the script here that I got the web pages for all the settings up here. The light, the render settings, and the quality settings, and the audio listener. So you could add more settings or do whatever you want. I was just doing this as a demo, so I did not put everything. Alright, so when a game pauses, we have to determine which audio source to play, because if you noticed it was playing two different songs. Okay, there's that, and when it resumes, it goes back to the other song. So mute this so you don't have to listen to it. Alrighty. So what we do here is we find all the audio sources in the scene. Tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. I dare you. And we loop through each one of them. And because we send in if the game was paused or not. If paused, we pause the source, and if not, we unpause it. So this way it keeps playing from where it left off. And then on our game menu source, we set it to either play it or stop. We do it last so it doesn't get set with this and turned off on pause. We want it to be playing. Alright, there's nothing new in update. The pause window, pretty much the same thing, other than we have added can pause so that when a new level is loading, you can't press the pause button and stop the loading, because that would be kind of cuckoo. Alright, nothing new in that. Nothing new there, so we go all the way down here. All the way, keep falling down, down, always down. Alright, so now we're down to the game settings window. And we'll get that off the screen there. This is just to how far down to move so that the sliders are in the middle of the labels, so that it lines up better than just having it all the way up at the top of the letter. Maybe you like it up there, maybe you want it down lower. Just add this, because down here, well, when we get down there I'll show you. And this is once again setting the scroll box height. So we have 10 values we're setting plus the default button. So we want the scroll box to be that many buttons high, plus 10 pixels between each one. Right, then we begin our scroll view. Right, so here's our quality level, and we get that from the quality settings. Then we get the name of it by using the index into the names array, and the max quality level would be the length -1, because the default level is not included, so we ignore that. We put our label with the name, like fantastic. Then we set a temporary variable, that was a great word, variable to that level, so that when we're done displaying our horizontal slider, we get to determine if it's been moved by the user, and if it has, and we're not on the default pause screen, then we could change it. So up here, we set the range to be 0, which would be the start of the quality settings array, and it's the max level of them. And then if you move the slider, it would put it into the quality level. Now what we're doing here is, since the slider returns a float value, we cast it to an integer, and that makes our button just go to each like level 0, level 1, level 2. Instead of level 1.322, it'll just go to the integer values, and that's why we cast this back to an integer here, and quality value is an integer. Alright, so then we do the light intensity, which is pretty much the same thing, but we don't have to cast it here because the intensity is a float. It's between 0 and 8, because the maximum intensity can be 8. Right, the ambient intensity, we're going between 0 and 1, because that's its range. And it's pretty much the same thing. If the value has changed, then we set it. And the reflection is the same. Shadow type, similar, but we get the name from the shadow type, plus we cast the shadow type to string because it's an enum value, an enumerated type, which has none, hard and soft in it. So we put the name. So then we make an integer of the shadow type, just convert the enumerated type into an integer, which would be 0, 1, or 2. And then once again, we're going to cast our slider to an integer with a range of 0 to 2, because there's only 3 values. And if the temp shadows is not equal to the current shadow type, and we're not on the start menu, then we change it and do the lights. We have to cast this back to the light shadows enum type so that we get the right value. Right, the shadow strength is pretty much the same as the light intensities and all of that, just a float value that we put on a slider between 0 and 1. Our shadow distance, same thing, but I made the range 1 to 300. You can make that any range you want. The fog is a Boolean value, just true and false, so our GUI is using a toggle, and we use the value of fog on. And we simply cast the fog on to a string and use that as the label of the checkbox. And then if this changes, then we change the fog setting. And the fog density is pretty much the same as the light intensities and all of that, just a float value between 0 and 1. And we put it on if it's changed. And the audio level does the same thing. And then here we're resetting the default values. So that's just simply putting the default value back into our current value, and then it applies the settings so that you can see it update. And this is just return to the options window. So that's pretty much how all of that works. So we can turn our sound up a little here so you can be excited by the music. And that is all there is to it. Let's jump onto this here. Alright. Hope this was a help. And next time I'll show you how to do the loading screen. Have fun and catch you later.